Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yulia Ivanuk, and I'm the coordinator of the Center for Ukrainian Canadian Studies at the University of Manitoba. I'd like to start by acknowledging that the University of Manitoba campuses are located on the original lands of Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. As Russia's invasion of Ukraine continues to displace thousands of Ukrainians, many of whom are coming to Canada, I'm pleased to be joined today by Aric Goodbrandson, Volunteer Services Manager of the Newcomers Employment and Education Development Services, a non-for-profit charitable organization that offers newcomer children, youth, and their families programming, and also makes integrating into Canadian life easier. So just a few housekeeping items before we proceed. Feel free to submit your questions into the chat box at any point during the presentation, and we'll do our best with addressing as many of those as possible during the Q&A session. Also, please note that this presentation is being video recorded and will be posted on the Center's YouTube page, and also will be available for later viewing. Well, Aric, now without further ado, the floor is all yours.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Yulia. And thank you again for the opportunity to be here and speak to everyone today. I'm just going to share my screen here, and then we'll get started. So again, my name is Aric. I'm the manager of volunteer services here at N.E.E.D.S. Newcomers Employment and Education Development Services is the full name, but we just go by N.E.E.D.S in a lot of cases. Again, just so excited for the opportunity to connect with you all today and tell you about the work that we do with all of our newcomers, and particularly in this case, right, a lot of Ukrainian newcomers that are coming into Winnipeg and just needing some support as they first arrive, and that's what we're here for. Yulia did give a land acknowledgement, but I'd just like to give another one as well. So we would like to acknowledge that we're on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. And also, as a nonprofit agency, it's really important for us to acknowledge the funders that we have, without whom we would not be able to provide the services that we do to the community. So we are funded by the governments as well as some other corporate sponsors on the screen there as well. Again, really important that we acknowledge that we would not be able to do the work that we do to support the community and our newcomers without our funders there. Now, as for what I'm going to be talking to you about today, I'm going to talk to you a bit about just N.E.E.D.S, our agency, a quick overview of kind of our history as an agency, as well as the work that we're doing today. If you're familiar at all with N.E.E.D S, maybe you'll know some of these things, but if you're not, again, just a brief overview of kind of the work that we do and the history that we have in the community. I'll also be talking about some of the challenges and risks that newcomers face when they first arrive in Winnipeg. It's really important to give you some context, right, as to what our clients are facing, what challenges and barriers exist for newcomers in general, and what we can do to support them. I will also be talking about the strengths and assets of newcomer children and youth. It's really important that we look beyond those challenges and risks as well, right? Sometimes it's too easy to kind of focus in on all of those challenges and barriers that they face and not emphasize and highlight the strengths and assets that those newcomers are also bringing with them to their new community. And then finally, I'm going to be talking to you more in depth about all of the services that we provide to Ukrainian newcomers and all the newcomers that we support, as well as volunteering opportunities that we offer to the community. And hopefully we can find some opportunities that you could potentially be interested and available for, and I'll give you more information about how you can give back to the community as well. For our first section, again, I'm going to talk to you just a bit about our agency and give you a bit of an overview of who we are. So we were originally established in 1999, but our story kind of starts well before that as well. Our CEO, Margaret von Lowe, she actually immigrated to Winnipeg in 1989 with her family. She had the experience of, coming to Winnipeg and having a hard time balancing not only learning English, getting integrated into the community, also finding meaningful employment, and all of this while being a mother and trying to take care of her family as well. Really difficult time initially to get adjusted. Her first decade, was filled with a lot of hard work, getting into the community, finding those supports that were there, which can be hard for a lot of newcomers, right? So it took some time to be able to find that support and find that community. One of the kind of key experiences that she had was enrolling in a career development program for immigrants, women. It kind of changed the future of not only her time getting integrated into Winnipeg, but also kind of establishing the agency. So again, through that program, she started working with other immigrant women who kind of shared their experiences, the struggles, the challenges that they had faced, and what they could do together in order to succeed. So after going back to university, studying human resources and management, she was actually able to develop what our agency is today, N.E.E.D.S Inc., with the whole goal of addressing those gaps that she experienced firsthand, as well as those other immigrant women that she connected with. And that's what's so important about our agency, I think, is that it is informed by people who have lived that immigrant experience, who have lived those challenges, those barriers, and know how to address them in the right way. So all of our programming, all of the services that we deliver today are informed by the experiences of those newcomers themselves who fought those challenges and were able to integrate into society in that way. Now, again, what we do today maybe looks a little different than when it first started, but in a lot of ways it's the same. Our mission is to provide accessible services and support to immigrants and refugee children, youth, and their families. The whole goal of this is to enhance the integration of immigrants and refugee youth into Canadian society by providing employment, education, and social recreation programming. All of those programs supported by psychosocial education to help clients succeed in integrating into Winnipeg. It's really important that psychosocial or mental health aspect of this too, right? Because there are a lot of challenges, a lot of trauma that can come from the immigrant's experience in coming to a new place, as well as a lot of challenges once they have resettled in kind of continuing their lives here. So it's really important to have that psychosocial focus in all of our programming, in our education, in our employment supports, and our community engagements. And as an agency, we serve more than 2,000 clients each and every year. That number continues to increase. It's been trending up for a number of years now and continues to do so. And obviously today, a lot of our clients are Ukrainian newcomers who've come over very recently. Now, as for our team at N.E.E.D.S, we started off with, I think it was about 6 staff members when they first started, and we now have a team of 90 staff. Really important to highlight that our staff come from more than 20 different countries and speak more than 30 different languages. A lot of the support that we provide, is really key to be able to provide that support in the first language of the clients that we're working with. So we're always working to provide interpretation and translation supports and make sure that our staff is as diverse as the client base that we're supporting in. So it's really important that we have that kind of international perspective in all of the work that we do as a team. Now, as for kind of our agency and what informs all of our policies and all of our procedures, it's really important to highlight the values and behavior expectations that we have, not only for our staff, but for our clients as well. For the services that we provide, our values are to provide quality services, to be capacity builders for our clients and for our staff, to be professional and act with integrity in all supports and services that we provide, as well as to be inclusive. Again, we're a very diverse place. We have a very diverse client base, so it's important to be inclusive. And finally, we are strength-based. Again, we're going to focus on the strengths and assets of newcomers as well, because it's really important to highlight those things as well and make sure that we focus on the strengths that all of our clients bring. As for our behavior model, something that informs how we interact with our clients and also how we interact with each other as staff, it's important to be safe, to be respectful of each other, to be a team in all the work that we do together, to be fun, have those fun opportunities to connect with each other and be fun with our clients, and finally, to be accountable. All of these things, again, they inform all of the services that we provide, every interaction with clients. If you're ever able to come down to our agency, you'll see posters like this up in all of our buildings all over. because it informs every single kind of action and service that we take part in as an agency. Our next section, I'm going to focus on the challenges and risks that are faced by newcomer children and youth. Now, again, we work with a lot of newcomers all over the world, but in particular right now, we're seeing a lot of Ukrainian newcomers, particularly children and youth, as we support children and youth in our agency. So it's really important to acknowledge the challenges that they face and make sure that we understand why they're facing them and how we can provide support to those clients. Maybe the first step in understanding this context is understanding what it means to be a newcomer. Newcomers generally fall into two categories. That would be an immigrant or a refugee. So an immigrant is a person who voluntarily comes to live permanently in a foreign country. The really important kind of thing to focus on with an immigrant is that they are generally prepared for that move, right? So whether it's having resources ready in order to make that move to a new country, having their documentation prepared, having a plan for when they arrive, to have employment ready, to have housing ready. All of these things are really important, a really important part of successfully integrating into a new place. And immigrants are generally prepared for that move and have a bit of that, that plan ready. So some source countries include China, the Philippines, India, the United Kingdom, and France. This is just some of the examples of countries that we've seen immigrants come from in our agency. Obviously, it's not an exhaustive list. There are a lot more countries that we see immigrants from as well. But again, refugees, that would be the other category. And we work with a lot of refugees in our agency. It's someone who is forced from their home country due to things like war, persecution, or natural disaster. I think the key difference to highlight there is that they would not be prepared for that move in this situation. You can't necessarily predict war or persecution, certainly not natural disasters, right? So it's more of a reaction and a quick kind of response to having to move to a new country. Some source countries for refugees include Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Somalia, Burundi, and obviously Ukraine. With the war that's happening in Ukraine, we're seeing a lot of Ukrainian refugees coming into Canada and into Winnipeg. It's important to also recognize that there's a journey involved with that immigrant process. We tend to see clients, or in your case, maybe you're interacting with newcomers once they've arrived in Canada, right? And it's important to highlight that that's just one phase in their journey. And all of these phases have their own challenges and barriers, as well as trauma that could be inflicted on newcomers during that process. So the first phase we refer to as pre-flight. Just as it sounds, it covers these series of events, sometimes occurring over years, that lead to the decision to flee before they have actually fled from their country. All of the events that are taking place that lead to that decision. The pre-flight phase can include challenges such as harassments, intimidation, and threats. Things like societal chaos or breakdown, right, in their original country. You could see the prohibition of cultural practices, in many cases, separation or isolation of family, including disappearances and even deaths, unfortunately, of family members. You tend to see a disruption of studies or a disruption of their education, a disruption of their plans for their life, those dreams and goals they had set out for themselves in their future, as well as, in many cases, a loss of employment or livelihood in that process as well. Now, the next kind of phase in this, what we call the triple trauma paradigm, is flight. And the flight phase covers the escape and flight from their original country to their eventual country of refuge. So some challenges that are faced during this flight phase can include physical assault, rape, or injury, fear of being caught or returned to their home country. Many newcomers witness violence in their flight from their original country. In some cases, there is detention at checkpoints or borders. Newcomers can experience illness or things like we kind of talked about earlier, uncertainty about their future, loss of their employment or livelihood, and a disruption of their education in that phase as well. And then the third and final phase is the post-flight phase, which is the period of resettlement. I have a couple more slides coming up where we'll get into that more in depth. But again, just to highlight that this is a much longer journey than maybe we realize when we just interact with newcomers who have arrived in Canada. Now, the post-flight migration phase, there are some specific and unique challenges to this resettlement phase that newcomers face, including family stress, education, psychosocial challenges, environmental barriers, and racism and discrimination. Again, these are kind of categories that we tend to see with newcomers that we're working with, and many, if not all of these, apply to Ukrainian newcomers as well. Just to break down, again, thinking of that triple trauma paradigm, some unique flight challenges that are maybe more specific that we've seen with our clients here. In that family category, you'll see things like a change in family dynamic. I'd mentioned earlier that in some cases, family members are either left in their original country. There are, in some cases, disappearances or even deaths of family members. So that can change the entire dynamic of a family when they do arrive in their home country or their new country. You'll see a lack of connections to available resources with families, right? Where as you're fleeing from your original country, a lot of resources that may have been available to you before are no longer available. And there's a lot of challenges associated with just not being able to connect with resources and supports that they do need. You'll see in many cases poverty or just a change in economic status for those newcomers who are fleeing, right? So in many cases, they're not prepared for that flight from their original country and aren't able to bring resources that they may have had, or some of those newcomers just didn't have those resources originally and are fleeing to a new country with that kind of lack of resources available to them. Now, educational challenges include things like disrupted schooling, obviously having to flee their original country to come to a new one. That educational pathway is disrupted by doing that. In many cases, when they do resettle in Canada, right, there's a process getting involved in the new Canadian school system that disrupts their education entirely. So that can be a real challenge, trying to get back on track with their education. Things like inappropriate grade placements, whether it's due to, in some cases, their education not being recognized here in Canada, or just the education systems being so fundamentally different that they have to retake grade levels that maybe they had done in their original country. I know that even for Ukraine, to be a more specific example, a lot of newcomers are expecting to end grade 11 and join university. That's how their school systems in many cases are run. And having to come to Canada where we have a grade 12 expectation. It's been a barrier to a lot of newcomers who expect that they are moving on to university or to that post-secondary education. And now suddenly that's not something that we necessarily do in Canada. That's not how our Canadian education system is run. So things like that, just coming to a new place and having different expectations for their education. There's also language barriers. Obviously, if many newcomers aren't speaking English as their first language, there's a lot of barriers to the education system or to resources that would be available to them. And then finally, some newcomers have a lower literacy level just in their first language. Maybe they haven't had access to education in the same way that we would here in Canada, right? And they are kind of coming into this with a lower literacy level already. Moving on to psychosocial. You could have challenges with just not having any support in coming to Canada. In many cases, it's just not being aware of the support that's there, right? And having to kind of be connected to those community resources. A lot of newcomers experience loneliness, isolation. It's a really big problem, as well as just distrust of the systems that are in place. Maybe they've experienced, issues with the systems they encountered in their original country, and that's why they're fleeing now. So it's hard to kind of trust those systems that are in place here in their new country. Mental health is obviously a serious issue with psychosocial support is needed for these newcomers, whether it's the trauma they experienced in their journey, whatever that ends up looking like. Everyone experiences trauma differently and their journeys differently. It's going to be a unique need for every single newcomer, but mental health tends to be a pretty common concern. And finally, experience of loss. Again, a lot of family members or friends are unfortunately either left behind or lost in that journey. It can be a serious, psychosocial concern. Moving on to environmental issues, housing is obviously a big one, right? So when they have first fled from their country, temporary housing, if they have access to that temporary housing, where a lot of newcomers end up getting support. But that temporary housing, there's a competition for resources to be able to get into temporary housing. A lot of times there isn't enough resources available for all newcomers that are fleeing to this new country. You also see a greater risk of things like gang activity, getting involved with drugs or criminal activity. Again, depending on the resources that are available. Sometimes newcomers have to turn to these kind of things in order to get by if they aren't available to get supports in other ways, or they just might not be aware of kind of the activities that are here and how to avoid getting involved in criminal activity or gang activity. Relocation, obviously with housing, right? If you are able to access temporary housing originally, you'll have to get relocated at some point, and that can be a real challenge to find housing later on. And then finally, just expectations of kind of what the culture, what the community is going to be like. If you're coming from a place that's experienced war, to suddenly adjust to a country like Canada, it can be really challenging. It can be hard to kind of have those expectations from their original country and then have to completely change those expectations. It's culture shock to kind of move to a new place that maybe doesn't have those same issues. And then finally, in that flight phase, there are a lot of challenges involving racism and discrimination for many newcomers. Actually, Indigenous and newcomers tend to face those same issues of racism and discrimination. It's always good to be able to connect those communities when we can. That's part of the Truth and Reconciliation action plan, actually, to connect those communities as best we can. And that racism and discrimination takes a lot of forms, whether it's from law enforcement, whether it's from the education system, or just the greater community in general. There's a lot of different ways that discrimination can unfortunately show itself. And moving into those post-flight challenges, again, so this is challenges that you might see when newcomers have arrived in Canada and have kind of resettled, have spent some time and been able to integrate into the community here somewhat. Parents are, in many cases, dealing with their own trauma from the journey, right? So having to parent your family when you're dealing with those challenges on your own, it can be really challenging, particularly if those parents just didn't have access to support to dealing with that trauma, those psychosocial issues, and now they're kind of expected to take the lead of their family. It can be really challenging. In a lot of cases, there's a financial burden associated with having to have fled, right? And then you're kind of put in a position where you are trying to pay off these transportation loans or just burdened by that financially, and then having to kind of transition and try to integrate into society here can be really challenging too. Family expectations, again, the family dynamic has shifted in a lot of cases. So suddenly, you have to kind of get used to life as it is now and moving on and what that looks like. We've kind of talked about it before, but fear and misperception of getting help. There's a lot of stigma in some cases with getting help, or just not being aware of those supports that are available to them in the community. Again, the stigma around that can be really challenging. Finally, again, that continued change in economic status can be a barrier as well. I'll move into education. Again, just navigating the school system here. I kind of talked about it earlier, but once clients have gotten support and have entered that Canadian school system, have entered their school, it's really challenging just to kind of get familiar with how things work. There might be, again, severe changes from their education system that they're used to the education system that we have here. So being able to navigate that, they'll need support with those kind of things. In some cases, there's just a lack of support that we have within our education system, whether it's a lack of awareness of the needs of newcomers or just a lack of support in general, right? That newcomers might need additional support or specific support that they're not getting. Silos with school communities can be a big problem as well. For example, when clients are brought into temporary housing, in a lot of cases, they're only familiar with or only directed to schools in the immediate surroundings of that temporary housing. So you suddenly have school areas that get an influx of children and youth who are looking to get support, looking to join a new school. And then once those families have left the temporary housing, they might move much farther away from that original school that they've been set up with, right? So it can be a real challenge kind of navigating that school community, knowing that you're going to have to be relocated as well. For a lot of our children and youth, working and going to school at the same time can be a real challenge. Having worked myself on the employment side of working with clients at N.E.E.D Center, a lot of clients are having to work full time and going to school, or work as much as they can at least and go to school. Balancing school work along with those work responsibilities to support their family can be really challenging as well. Psychosocial, again, we've kind of talked about the mental health aspect. That's important for all of our services, but a lot of newcomers just don't have those coping strategies that may seem obvious to us or that we've been educated about. There just might not be that kind of same awareness for coping strategies in other countries that we have. It's really important to get that education about what coping looks like for the trauma that they've experienced. Behavioral and learning difficulties in the classroom, kind of stemming from the trauma that they faced and maybe not getting those supports that they needed, can be a real barrier to that education, obviously, stemming from the trauma that they may have experienced. Again, some of the kind of common issues you see are emotional stress, physical manifestation of the trauma they've experienced, as well as in some cases, aggression, depression, or just withdrawing from activities, becoming isolated because of the trauma that they have experienced. Environmentally, food can be a core issue. Again, just resources in general, but obviously food is a very important one. If families are experiencing those challenges economically, it's going to be hard to have access to food or to know where they can turn to. Knowing where there are food banks or resources available to them to get access to. Again, systems, just in general, the kind of bureaucracy around getting support in Canada can be a real challenge. There's a lot of documentation and paperwork necessary. And if, for a lot of our Ukrainian newcomers, if they're not aware of the requirements of these systems, of the paperwork or the documentation that they need in order to access resources, can be really hard to navigate these systems without that kind of awareness or that education. There's also pressure to support families, particularly back home. A lot of people who are able to move to Canada might have family back in their original country that they're expected to, work here and then send money back so that that family can either support themselves or eventually move to Canada. It can be a real pressure to have on those families that are here, especially children and youth who might just be entering the Canadian job market and are now expected to send money back to their family back at home and support them that way. Equality in Canada, just kind of cultural expectations in general, depending on the country that newcomers come from, can be a real culture shock moving to Canada, and some of the expectations we have around gender equality or just cultural equality in general, and kind of getting used to those cultural expectations can be a big barrier. And finally, kind of as I mentioned in a few different categories, relocation. Housing is a really obviously big concern and a big challenge for newcomers. Once they are in that temporary housing, at least they've got some supports temporarily, but again, long term, they are living in Canada in the long term. It's really important to be able to find housing and for it to kind of fit with their employment opportunities that they find, to fit with the education system that they've entered and whatever school they end up working in. So it's really important to be able to get that support with housing as well. Okay, so again, it's common issues and common challenges that we see with newcomers, that we've seen with the Ukrainian newcomers in this case. That's by no means an exhaustive list, and it's really important to note that the newcomer experience is unique to every client as well. Their own challenges that they face. And kind of speaking of, I'd mentioned this earlier, it's really important to highlight not only the challenges, not only the barriers that they're facing, but also the strengths and the assets that our newcomers are going to be bringing to Winnipeg, to Canada in their new life. Now, something that we say in our agency and that we like to remind everyone of is that we need to remember the roots when we're working with newcomers. So everyone that we meet, including newcomer children and youth, they all have a wealth of experiences and strengths and knowledge that they have to share to bring to their new community. Oftentimes when newcomers come to Canada, they're struggling to learn a new language or to get accustomed to a new culture, navigating all of these new systems. It's really easy to forget that they have these strong roots, all of this knowledge and wealth and experiences that they're bringing with them, that we might not be able to see necessarily at first impression. So even though they're adjusting to all these new things, it doesn't mean that they're not bringing all of those new experiences or all of those strengths and wealth of experiences with them. So it's really important to remember that when we're working with newcomers. Again, because at first impression, it can be really tough to kind of see beyond those challenges and barriers that they're facing. We know all about it, but it's really important to know about the strengths and the assets that they're bringing with them as well. These are just some examples. Again, it's unique to every client, unique to every newcomer, but some of the strengths and assets that we see from newcomer children and youth in our agency. Most, if not all, of our newcomers, right, are going to be bilingual or even multilingual. Canada happens to be a fairly bilingual country between French and English, right? But many of our newcomers speak 3, 4, even more languages. It's something that they don't even kind of recognize as a strength in many cases. But if you think about it, it's how many people can say that here in Canada, right? That they speak so many different languages and can potentially connect to so many different communities and people. So something to really keep in mind is that if you're speaking to a newcomer who maybe doesn't have the same English skills as us, just remember that they're speaking in a second or even third language. And they're doing that in order to communicate with you. They're kind of doing you the favor of speaking in English in those cases. A lot of our newcomers also have strong cultural and family values, whether it's just kind of cultural expectations from the original country they came from, or in many cases informed from their experience of potentially losing family or losing their culture, their connection to their culture. They'll tend to have a strong value in those things. Finally, a sense of resiliency and flexibility, whatever you want to call it, adaptability to a new place, right? There's so many changes, so many different expectations that come from moving to a new place and having to integrate into that culture, into that society. So the adaptability that newcomers show is really important to their journey. And kind of by surviving that journey and coming to live in a new place, they're building that sense of adaptability and resiliency as well. A few other strengths and assets that we tend to see: leadership, problem solving, and negotiating skills. Think about all of the barriers that they've had to overcome, all of the systems that they've had to navigate. In many cases, maybe not in their first language or not having the kind of knowledge of how these systems work, but they've had to figure that out anyways. It tends to build these skills in those newcomers, and they bring that with them into their new life. A strong sense of community, again, whether it's due to the kind of cultural expectations from their home country or just the experiences that they've been through. A lot of newcomers really want to not only become, integrated into the community, but also give back to the community. In my work with Ukrainian newcomers, we've seen a lot of people coming to Canada. You'd expect them to be accessing our services and needing support in that way, but they're actually reaching out to give back in order to volunteer and help others in the community. So that sense of community is really strong in a lot of newcomers. And finally, the value of education. Again, a lot of newcomers have that disruption of their education. And it can be a real challenge, but at the same time, it makes them value that education anymore. They tend to really pursue that and understand the importance of getting an education, because they either may have almost lost their opportunity at education, or in a lot of cases, they may not have had those same opportunities from their home country. And now that they've moved to Canada, the educational opportunities here are something that's of great value to them. All right, so again, now that we've kind of talked about some of the challenges and barriers that newcomers face, as well as the strengths and assets they bring, I'd like to focus more on some of the work that we do at our agency, kind of going in depth into each of the programs that we have, each of the services that we provide, to give you an idea of the work that we're doing with all of our newcomers. And again, in this case, with all of the Ukrainian newcomers that we're able to support in our agency. So as you can see on the screen here, we kind of have a flow, a circle of services that we provide to our clients. Those are our Introduction to Canadian Education, or INTRO program, our Settlement Workers in Schools, or SWIS for short, our Psychosocial Support Services, which are kind of a part of all of our different programs and services. We also have Enhanced Wellness Programming. We have Employment Services, which is just what it sounds like, getting into the Canadian job market. And then finally, Volunteer Services. As I said earlier, I'm the manager of Volunteer Services here at N.E.E.D.S. That's kind of what I'm more or less here to talk to you about, but it's important to know all of the other opportunities, all of the other services and programs that we provide, so you can get an idea of why volunteering is so important to our agency. Now, for the Introduction to Canadian Education program, or Intro for short, we're providing free educational and school preparedness orientation programming for newly arrived children and youth aged 6 to 21 who are awaiting placements in Canadian school. So if you think about the Ukrainian newcomers who are first arriving to that temporary housing, the hotels that we have set up, we are going to those locations and making sure that we are registering clients in order to enter programs like the intro program and get this educational support, this school preparedness and orientation programming, all to make sure that they're integrating into life here in Winnipeg and in Canada as successfully as possible. We provide the support to government-assisted refugees and privately sponsored refugees. That's who we get funding in order to support. So those are the clients that we have in our programming. Activities focus on, again, education and employment, but also things like health and nutrition, safety and law, places and community resources that are available here. It's really important to focus on those things. Again, coming to a new country, so many things that you just wouldn't be aware of or wouldn't be familiar with that are fundamentally different from their original country, say from Ukraine to Canada. And the majority of students who enter the intro program are actually in their first week of coming to Canada. So again, we are there as soon as these newcomers are coming into Canada, as soon as they get into that temporary housing, we have staff who are able to meet them, assess what they need, and get them registered in this program if it's a good fit for them right away. Again, some of the activities that are focused on education, employment, health, nutrition, safety, and law, talked about that earlier, but all of this is focused on that welcome to Canada. So just giving a general overview of Canada, some of the rights and freedoms that they're going to have now, understanding kind of financial systems, all of that stuff that is really important to just kind of being oriented into living in Canada. As I kind of said, some of our program components include school preparedness. And what that really means is just learning about Canadian classrooms. What expectations are there of students who are in school here? What does the Canadian education system look like? We offer orientation to Winnipeg. Again, getting connected with community services and resources. If you don't know what community services are out there, how are you going to find them? So that's kind of the role that we try to provide, bridging them to those resources. We offer English language skill development as well as social recreation activities. All of this with the goal of kind of team building, getting that sense of community back, making sure that newcomers aren't feeling isolated, making friends with other newcomers as well. All the kind of fun activities too. Things like addressing common settlement issues. So again, culture shock and the trauma associated with the journey, as well as making new friends, like I just mentioned in the social recreation activities. All the kind of stuff that's really important for newcomers. Computer skills, hey, in the world of the pandemic, doing things remotely like we're doing right now, having those computer skills is really important as well. It does seem like the computer skills, particularly for our Ukrainian newcomers, is really important for them. And finally, pro-social integration, just things like general awareness of decision-making or anger management, coping skills, like I talked about with trauma. All of these things are really important components of the intro programming that we offer. So next up, we have our settlement workers in schools, or SWIS services. And our SWIS services are provided to enhance the integration of newcomer children, youth, and their families in the first 18 to 36 months of arriving in Winnipeg and arriving into their new community. So again, this is kind of the next step, if you can think of it that way, in our services. Once they have gone through that orientation programming, once they have all of that basic knowledge that they need, they'll be getting support from our SWIS workers in schools. So SWIS staff work in partnership with school staff and services and service providers to deliver additional supports to those recently arrived newcomer children and youth. Now, since 2016, we've been providing services and continue to work in 4 of the 6 Winnipeg school divisions. We currently support refugee and newcomer students within the following school divisions: Louis Riel, Palmetto Trails, St. James Assiniboia, as well as the Winnipeg School Division. So again, they're actually working in schools in those school divisions, making sure that clients are getting the support that they need. For our SWIS workers, some of the program components include support with school registration and participating in school intake and orientation meetings, enhanced SWIS supports to refugee and newcomer children and youth who experience challenges beyond the commonly experienced and expected settlement needs. So again, kind of tailoring things to be unique to whatever the newcomers do need. We also provide ongoing follow-up and support to students through the first 18 months of being in Canada, just to ensure that they are successfully integrating into the school community. We offer one-on-one and group orientation activities from our Swiss workers as well. Finally, maybe kind of the most important part of this is just the completion of those assessment and referrals, making sure that we're assessing what newcomers need and referring them to whatever the appropriate community resources are. And then finally, pro-social skill development and wellness programming to take care of all of those psychosocial needs that they would have to. Now, our employment services, again, just what it sounds like, our employment services are working to help our refugee youth, little older, 16 to 29 generally, but to develop their employability skills and enter and successfully participate in the Canadian labor market. So again, the whole goal of this is to help our clients find that independence that comes with getting their first job. Obviously, the Canadian job market has unique, processes and requirements that might be different from their home country. So making sure they get the education that they need in order to join the Canadian job market here too. Some of the supports that we offer include individual career coaching and employment support. So one-on-one support in building your resume, writing a cover letter, getting prepared to write interviews, to participate in interviews and job searching. Employment readiness training designed to prepare newcomer youth for the Canadian workplace. We run workshops that are interactive and hands-on in order to help youth get engaged in the learning process and build their interpersonal skills, their communication skills, their confidence, and their professional skills. We also offer English for employment purposes training, which is an opportunity to build their English language skills specific to the Canadian workplace through sector-specific language training with partners in the city. We actually have a lot of local partners who we work with to make sure we're giving that education and finding those work opportunities as well. Work experience and on-the-job support. So we actually match youth with partnering employers to provide that meaningful and hands-on work placement. Clients receive on-the-job mentorship and support when they're actually in that job environment to help increase their chances of success in participating in the Canadian job market. All right, and as I've said earlier, psychosocial support kind of is incorporated into every program and service that we offer, but the whole goal of this is to provide those newcomer children and youth with additional support focused on mental health in participating in services at our agency. All of this with the goal of enhancing their success and ensuring a smoother transition during their settlements and integration into Canadian society. Enhanced wellness programming kind of relates to that psychosocial aspect. So it actually provides additional enhanced supports to our clients, as well as their families, in increasing their mental health awareness and just overall well-being through evidence-based interventions. One of the really important program components that we have in here is our Circle of Security parenting groups. We offer this to parents and caregivers with interpretation support available in many different languages to make sure that they're getting that knowledge in their first language. We also offer, though, delivery of trauma-informed and culturally appropriate curriculum and group-based sessions. Again, trauma-informed is really important for these newcomers to make sure that they're getting that additional support that they do need. We offer one-on-one supports for children and youth to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the challenges that they are dealing with, meeting them where they are, assessing what needs they have that are unique to those specific people. And we also offer training for service providers and educational professionals, making sure that they're able to meet the needs of refugee and newcomer children and youth. One of the trainings that we work with is Making Sense of Trauma, offered by New Directions, which is a really great trauma-informed perspective to give to all service providers who are working with newcomers. Now, again, I'm here from Volunteer Services. As a nonprofit agency, it's really important to know that all of our programs and activities are heavily dependent on the support of volunteers and practicum students. So being a nonprofit, we want to make sure that any funding that we get is going directly to our programs, directly to our clients, enhancing their experience here and being able to reach wider into the community. So truly, without volunteers and practicum students, we would not be able to offer the support that we do to our clients, to our newcomers, and of course, our Ukrainian newcomers as well. One of the programs that we offer that we have a lot of volunteer support in is our remote after-school mentorship program. So our remote volunteer mentors, what you would be doing in this program is actually volunteering to remotely assist our newcomer clients in our after-school homework club, which is open to clients in grades 1 through 12. It's a program that runs during the school year, so September until June, Mondays through Thursdays, from 4 until 8 p.m. Additional volunteer opportunities are also shared with our volunteers. So if you start volunteering with us and another opportunity opens up, you'll be the first to hear about it. But this is just one example that we're offering as a program to our clients and as well as a volunteer opportunity to our community. So just some of the things that you'll be doing as a remote volunteer mentor. You'd be providing tutoring support in various subject areas, things like English, math, science, whatever school topic that clients need support in that case. You'd also be assisting newcomer and refugee children and youth develop and foster positive relationships with adults in a safe environment. Again, isolation is a really big challenge for newcomers and not being able to integrate into the community by making those kind of connections. So just being a mentor, being able to connect, talk to someone in the community, build those relationships they wouldn't normally be able to, really provides a step up in building their confidence and their language skills, as well as getting that tutoring experience for them. You'd also be providing support, again, to help develop, practice, and improve their English language skills, which is going to help with their confidence in building relationships here, as well as entering the Canadian job market when they're old enough to do so. It also aids with the integration and social interactions. Again, just getting practice having conversations is really important as well for our clients. As well, the program is supervised by our staff. You'd be meeting one-on-one with clients in breakout rooms, but there's always going to be Swiss staff who are present who can help you out with any tips that you need in working with clients and make sure that your sessions are going well when you're tutoring your clients. Some of the volunteer requirements for becoming a volunteer at our agency, we would ask you to commit to a minimum of 2.5 hours a week for 3 consecutive months in volunteering. We can be flexible with the length of time, the 3 consecutive months, depending on kind of your situation, but 2.5 hours would be 1 volunteer shift a week. That's kind of what we're looking for from our volunteers. Just a quick run through of the kind of checks involved with becoming a volunteer. You would need to get a criminal record check with vulnerable sector search. If you are able to supply us with the identification needed, we could actually apply for your child abuse registry check on your behalf, and then you wouldn't have to pay the associated costs with that. You would need to fill out a quick application form and then participate in an interview with our volunteer team, attend an orientation session. It's not normally 2 hours, it's about 40 minutes or so, and then complete all required training. Once you've done all those steps, you'd be able to start volunteering in a program like our remote after-school mentorship program. Just some of the benefits of volunteering in a program like ours. You get to be building work experience to help in your future education or your career goals, and just learning about opportunities related to immigrants and refugee issues. We also offer skill development workshops and community engagement groups to all of our volunteers working remotely in this RAMP program, which means there's further opportunities for skill building, for additional training, as well as just kind of getting connected with the community, right? So you're going to connect with our community of volunteers who are like-minded, who are wanting to give back to their community, wanting to give back to Ukrainian newcomers or newcomers in general, and just kind of build those connections. Obviously, doing that remotely can be a challenge, right, compared to in-person volunteering. So we make a point of offering these groups so that you can do that as well. You're also going to gain exposure to strategies in dealing with clients from more affected countries, right, who have gone through those traumatic experiences. You'll be able to support them, obviously supported with the training that we're offering you too, in dealing with those kind of situations and handling traumatic experiences. And then finally, you're going to be increasing your understanding of people from different backgrounds. We've got a very diverse staff. We've got a very diverse client base. So you're going to be meeting new people from all around the world, getting an understanding of the different needs or expectations of different people that you're working with. Now, the other opportunity that I want to talk to you about specifically is our Ukraine response. We've done a lot of really important work, I think, in this Ukraine response. So I'm going to tell you about it now. One of the things that we were tasked with in partnership with MANSO is to recruit volunteers who are specifically interested in supporting Ukrainian newcomers with things like transportation, interpretation, translation, and youth programming. So once processed, these volunteers would be referred to other service providing organizations in Winnipeg needing support for the influx of Ukrainian newcomers. Obviously, N.E.E.D.S is just one of a whole network of organizations that are supporting newcomers, specifically newcomer Ukrainians in this case. So in partnership with the Manitoba Association of Newcomer Serving Organizations, or MANSO for short, we developed this network of organizations that are actually working together to make sure that all these Ukrainian newcomers are getting the support that they need. And as part of this process, N.E.E.D.S was able to create this specialized stream of recruitments and screening in order to find these volunteers who are interested in supporting the newcomer Ukrainian population in Winnipeg, and make sure to make that process as fast as possible in order to get through the application, get processed, and be able to give back to the community. So once you've done that, once you have applied and successfully gone through all the training involved, we connect those volunteers with other newcomer and ethnocultural organizations that are here in Winnipeg. Organizations that include New Journey Housing, Mount Carmel Clinic, the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, and many more. We've had about 15 different organizations so far that have made requests and received volunteers from us through this process. And right now in our database of volunteers, we have more than 70 volunteers specifically who've reached out about supporting Ukrainian newcomers and are being referred out to those organizations. Some of the requirements involved in this process, again, it's very similar to what we have with our agency. You would need to submit a criminal record check with vulnerable sector search. Again, submit that identification so that we can apply for a child abuse registry check on your behalf. Fill out a quick application form and then participate in an orientation session with us, where we'll kind of run through more specifically how this process works, how we'd be referring you out to different organizations, and all the kind of stuff that you need to know to become a UKR volunteer. And then finally, once you've completed all of those steps, we would connect you with other Ukrainian newcomer serving organizations. So again, the whole of this is to kind of streamline that process, make sure that these other organizations have a steady, stable volunteer base where they can reach out to us, find those people who are interested in giving back right away, and rather than having to recruit you for themselves or get your criminal record check and child abuse registry check ready, all of that is taken care of already, and we can just refer you directly to that organization. Some of the benefits of becoming a UKR volunteer and supporting Ukrainians through this specific process. Again, obviously you'll be supporting Ukrainian newcomers, and it's really important to be doing that. We have a lot of Manitobans who are really interested and engaged in supporting Ukrainian newcomers. So this is just one of many ways to do that. But some of the benefits of doing it through this UKR process are that you're applying once to volunteer for this whole network of organizations, right? So one application, one process of getting your check submitted, and then we can refer you to a network of 70 or more organizations in the province. You also have the opportunity to find the volunteer opportunity that's right for you, right? So all these agencies are sending requests to us for specific volunteers, depending on the roles or requirements or needs that they have in their organization. And you'll have the opportunity to see all of these different volunteering roles and decide which one is a good fit for you. And then finally, you'd be gaining work experience in any number of potential volunteer roles. Again, there's a number of different agencies, a bunch of different volunteer roles that you could potentially participate in. And all of those are unique experiences that'll give you new work experiences and experience with new organizations in the province that could benefit you. Okay, so again, that was kind of our overview of our agency, of the newcomers that we're working with, the challenges that they face, the strengths and assets that they have, as well as two kind of unique volunteer opportunities that we have for Ukrainian newcomers. If you have any questions at all about anything that I've been talking about, you can also feel free to give us a call or email us. I have our volunteers@needsinc.ca email up, as well as our Ukraine support at needsinc.ca. If you're interested in volunteering, you can reach out to us by either of those two email addresses or give us a call. We'll answer any questions that you have and get you started on that application process if you're interested. And then finally, I just want to say, again, just thank you so much for this opportunity. I have our social media up on here as well. If you'd like to give us a follow or learn more about our agency, feel free to connect with us on any of those platforms. But thank you again so much for listening and for giving me the opportunity to tell you about N.E.E.D.S today. With that said, I will throw it back to our host, Yulia.
Thank you so much, Aric. It was really informative, and I'm sure there are lots of questions. So feel free to submit your questions into the Q&A chat box, and we'll make sure to read them out for you. So in the meantime, I suppose I'll ask a question. Aric, is there anything else that the hosting community and the Ukrainian Canadian community in particular can do to facilitate the process of integration of the newcomers into the new Canadian environment?
Yeah, I mean, again, I love the work that we do, and we do a lot of important work, but we are one of many organizations in the city. I can tell you that with the number of Ukrainians coming in, all of these organizations need additional support from volunteers. I think volunteering is a really critical way to get involved. With that said, there are lots of organizations that you can find and connect with, whether it's for volunteering or I know a lot of organizations are accepting donations in order to kind of provide additional support as well. But this UKR process in particular, I think is a really key one because it's a good opportunity to, apply for volunteering in one specific place and then be able to connect with so many different organizations in the city and in the province. So I personally am very invested in volunteering, and I think that's a really crucial way not only to give back to that community and get involved with these organizations, but again, that community connection, you're just going to be able to connect with so many new people, and that being able to break down those barriers of isolation, getting people involved in the community is a really important part of this as well. So to me, I think volunteering is probably the best way to get involved with whatever opportunity you end up volunteering in.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And now, Andrew, please go ahead with your question.
Okay, I had a couple of questions. Just out of curiosity, where is this N.E.E.D.S, or where are they located in Winnipeg? Out of curiosity.
Yeah, of course. So technically we have 3 buildings, but they're all clustered very close together. We are at 251 Notre Dame Avenue, so right downtown. So we obviously offer support in our agency downtown. With that said, we've been able to have a lot of transportation support as well. So that's how we can connect with clients who are in that temporary housing in hotels, right, near the airport. So we can not only go out to those locations and work with clients directly there, but we're also able to have transportation for clients to bring them to our agency so that they can get involved in our classrooms, get that experience of joining our orientation classes, and then transport them back to their temporary housing situation. So we are located downtown, which can be a barrier to some people, and we understand that. That's why we make a point of offering that kind of transportation support, as well as our remote programming, right? It's been a really good opportunity to just have kids join on Zoom from wherever they are in the city, and still get that kind of full experience that they would get from being able to come downtown to our agency.
Okay, and then I had another question. Okay, so you had staff or persons who work with students in certain school divisions, right? But I was just curious, like, or it's available in certain school divisions, but not in others. And I wondered about that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And if I'm being completely transparent with you, maybe something that I'm not as informed about, just being kind of exclusively involved in the volunteer programming. My understanding is that there is, whether it's funding or just partnerships with those school divisions involved, there's a lot of kind of networking and kind of confirming details of a partnership in order to enter different school divisions. I know that we're always working on kind of expanding our network and getting involved in more school divisions. But yeah, again, from my understanding, there's just kind of some behind the scenes work that needs to be done to enter those new school divisions that we're always working to do. To be honest with you, again, though, just being more involved in the volunteer side, there's probably some nuances to that frankly, I'm just not as familiar with as some of our other staff would be.
Perfect. And we have another question from the audience related to an area that you have already alluded to in your presentation. So the question is from Serhii, and perhaps you could provide a little bit more information about whether work permit holders that are arriving to Canada under the new Canada-Ukraine Authorization Travel Program are eligible to be volunteers, and whether if the restriction, the work restriction on their work permit has not been removed yet, if they are also eligible to participate in your programming as volunteers and to help out.
Yeah, from my understanding, we always have to treat it on a case-by-case basis as well, right? So there are always changes that, frankly, it's a very fluid situation. I think a lot of these kind of procedure and policy things end up changing, and we have to kind of adapt to those new rules as they do come. But yeah, we do have a lot of newcomers who arrive and are not in the country for very long and are already reaching out and offering to provide volunteer support, and we are able to accommodate that. Again, those kind of requirements that we have for volunteering, things like criminal record check and child abuse registry check, as long as they're able to submit that kind of documentation. In some cases, it's documentation that they used in order to come to Canada, right? So they've already had that paperwork kind of done and are able to submit it to us. So in some cases, that process is even easier because they have the documentation already. But yeah, whatever we can do to accommodate anyone who is wanting to give back and support the volunteer community. Again, we kind of have to treat it on a case-by-case basis and be mindful of policies and procedures that are changing. But yeah, we do our best to accommodate anyone who's interested in volunteering. And in the most cases, we absolutely can.
Thank you. And I can see Darlene had another question. All right, while you think about your question, Aric, I have a tough question. You mentioned the importance of building bridges between the newcomers and the Indigenous population. Do you have any educational initiatives or suggestions for ways for the newcomers to learn more about the Indigenous history, about the settler-colonial relationship dynamics, and the importance of tolerance towards the struggles of other ethnic groups in general?
Yeah, that's such a good and important question. And in some ways, again, I would have to say that it's something that our executive team is more involved in than I am. But what I can say is that it's definitely top of mind for us. I know that we've had some kind of programming and services involved before the pandemic, where we were able to actually connect Indigenous youth with our newcomer youth, kind of have programming associated around that and around education, like you said. I think it's something that's, coming out of the pandemic and getting kind of back to in-person opportunities, we're looking to offer any opportunities like that we can. I think the biggest part of that is making sure that we have, the right staff to facilitate those kind of opportunities, or have the right connections in the community to make sure that we are offering that education in the right way. In our volunteer team specifically, which I can maybe speak to more about, we've been looking into offering skill development workshops that are maybe with that topic of Indigenous communities and Indigenous education. But again, it's more of, we want to make sure that we have not only the right education, but also just the right people involved in that process to be doing it correctly and to be doing it from the most informed and appropriate perspective that we can offer. But it's definitely something that we're mindful of and that we want to make sure is incorporated as soon as possible.
Thank you so much for this feedback. And Darlene, you can go ahead now if you'd like.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't think you mentioned this already. Is there an age in particular that you wish for the volunteers to be? Like, is it only available to people who are over the age of 18, or can other people apply to volunteer as well? That's my question.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. That's a really good question. And again, this is something that's kind of on a case-by-case basis. We do, though, allow volunteers who are 16 and up. Again, it depends on some other things as well. We would need to follow up and make sure that we have the correct checks, at least that what we can get for that certain age range that you would be. We have had volunteers as young as 16 in programming. Again, though, it's kind of a case-by-case basis. Part of the recruitments and application process is just vetting out anyone who we have who would be a potential volunteer. But we have had youth volunteers in the past, 16 and up. It also depends on the volunteer opportunities that we have as well. One of the nice things about this remote after-school mentorship program that we're offering is that, again, we have clients as young as like grade 1 in that programming, right? So we can usually accommodate having some younger volunteers as long as they're working with even younger clients and have some kind of additional support. So that's a long-winded way of me saying that as young as 16, we have had volunteers involved in programming. I can't say definitively that we'll accept all volunteers who are that age. Generally, it's 18 and up. But at the same time, if you're interested and you are 16 or over, feel free to reach out. We will get connected and make sure that we can bring you on board if we're able to.
Well, thank you so much, Aric, for all of this useful information. And thank you, N.E.E.D.S Foundation, for your important work, and to all of you for joining us here today. We'll have another event in February, so please stay tuned for more information. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks so much for the time.